What's going on, guys? It's Jack with Jack Banks MMA, and today we are going to be running through the entire UFC Fight Night Santos versus Hill card from a betting perspective. So without further ado, let's kick it off with the top of the card, the opener of Mayra Bueno Silva versus Stephanie Egger. Guys, I gotta be honest with you off the bat with this first spot on the card. I don't have a strong feel either way. Running over the basic stats, very similar in terms of height. Both are 5'6". Reach, you have a slight inch and a half reach advantage for Stephanie Egger. Bueno Silva is the younger fighter, 3 years younger, and she's had two more fights, on her record. So very similar in terms of experience. Egger has that judo background, but Bueno Silva has very good jiu-jitsu. So I think this is a very good fight and one that I will be staying away from. Next up on the card, we have Cory McKenna taking on Miranda Granger. And this is an interesting fight to me, and one that I do think I will have action on. So on one side, you have Cory McKenna, who's 6'2", 23 years old, standing 5'3" in the strawweight division, and is measured in with a reach of 58.5 inches. On the other side, you have Miranda Granger, who's 7'2", 30 years old, 5'7", and 68 inches of reach. So nearly right about 4 inches of height in terms of the advantage for Granger, and nearly 10 inches of reach. And I think from face value, this looks like a classic striker versus grappler matchup. To an extent, I think it is, right? Granger had her start in Taekwondo. McKenna is definitely grappler, wrestler based. And, McKenna really struggled getting the takedowns, but also the volume, the number of takedowns in her last fight against Elise Reed, to me, was really lacking. And for that reason, in a fight where McKenna is a near or right around a 2-1 favorite, I have to take Granger because I think this is closer to a 50-50. Yes, Granger is coming off of 2 consecutive losses herself. However, one of them is against Amanda Lemos, which it's hard to fault Granger for that. And the other was against Ashley Yoder. The difference in this fight compared to that one from a grappling perspective to me is that Yoder was a similar size to Granger, whereas McKenna is much shorter. And I think from what I noticed with Granger, she did a better job with some of the more traditional takedown attempts, and was able to kind of get her underhooks and go from there. However, she did kind of stay a little too long in those areas, which I didn't love. On the flip side, though, Yoder was able to get the head and arm and kind of get those tosses, those kind of takedowns against Granger, utilizing her length in that fight. And so for that reason, I will be betting Miranda Granger, not a large amount, a small bet, probably about a quarter of a unit this weekend. Next up on the card, we have Jason Witt taking on Josh Quinlan. Now, this is a very interesting fight to me for really only one reason, and that reason is Josh Quinlan's suspension. Without that suspension, I would be going very heavy on Josh Quinlan in this fight. From his tape, it was kind of funny. I didn't realize he had that suspension, so I was watching his tape in preparation for my bets for this card. And there were several times, not just on the Contender Series, where he was able to hit people on the temple, and their reaction was similar to that on the Contender Series, where their legs were gone. And to me, when I was watching it, I was thinking, it's like this guy has a superpower. And it turned out he did, right? He popped for steroids at the Contender Series. And so for that reason, and because of Jason Witt's chin, or unfortunately lack thereof, Quinlan is the pick. The only question for me with Quinlan is how does he look coming off the suspension? The one thing with Quinlan, even in his previous fights, he got stronger as the fights went on, and you have to wonder how much of that was the steroids, right? So I have a small parlay with Quinlan in another fight later on this card, I would have gone heavier without the suspension. So that's where I'm at with this one. I'm going with Josh Quinlan to win. And if not for the suspension, I would say I am still going to say round 1 TKO, but I'm not as confident because of the suspension and that uncertainty. Next up on the card, we have Bryan Battle taking on Takashi Sato. Sato is 16-5, 32 years old, 5'10", 73 inches of reach. Bryan Battle is 27. He has a 7-1 record, 6'1", 76 or 77 inches of reach. I've seen a couple of different numbers for Battle, but the big number that I think is important for this one is Battle is moving down from middleweight to welterweight. And that is the only thing that's giving me a bit of pause in this matchup. Battle started his amateur career actually fighting at heavyweight, and he's talked about it. We've seen a progression in his physicality, in his body, right? He's definitely improved. He's gotten leaner from camp to camp, from fight to fight, and this is another step in that path. It's kind of in the similar vein to Jared Cannonier, where he's improving his body and improving as a fighter at the same time. And I really do think his long range attacks, his teep kicks, his ability to keep the fight in a range that he likes is going to really play into his hands against Sato, who just does not throw enough volume. And that's been a problem for him in his entire UFC career. And the only reason I'm going to stay away from this fight is that Battle is dropping down the weight class here. Without that X factor, I would be taking Battle, probably in a parlay, in a nice 2-leg parlay here. But with that uncertainty and the fact that I really do think Sato will have a speed advantage, I am hesitant, or if I were to bet this fight at this point, I would probably have a small bet on Sato. That's how much the change in weight class means to me, because Battle's not the fastest guy at 185, and Sato's, for as much as I talked about his lack of volume, the speed on his left hand is certainly there, and he does a great job of setting it up by pawing out his right hand and moving the opposite hand of the person who he's fighting to create an opening to throw that left hand. I just wish he did it more often. So I'm leaning towards no bet on this fight, but if I were to place a bet, it would be a small one on Sato, depending on how Battle looks on the scales come Friday. Next up, we have Terrance McKinney taking on Erick Gonzalez. This is the most lopsided betting line on the card. McKinney's 12-4, 27 years old, 5'10". His last fight was a short notice appearance against Drew Dober, which was absolutely insane. I thought McKinney won it, and then Dober rallied back and took it for himself, and it was one of the most action-packed 2 to 3 minute fights that I think I've seen in quite some time. And we have to give that to McKinney. He comes out right away and he doesn't waste any time. Now on the flip side, Erick Gonzalez, he's 14-6, 30 years old, 5'11", 155 pounds. He had his UFC debut against Jim Miller. Did not end well for Erick Gonzalez. And I think there's good reason why McKinney is the favorite. He probably has the stand-up advantage, and he will certainly have the wrestling advantage. The only question to me in this fight is, how does McKinney get it done? I think he gets it done in the first round. I don't know if it's going to be by TKO or submission, though, because I do think his wrestling advantage will be pretty big. And in the Fares Ziam fight, we saw McKinney take advantage of that very quickly. And I could see him doing something similar in this fight against Erick Gonzalez. Look to take the back, go for a rear naked choke in the first round. So I'm going to say Terrance McKinney, first round submission. Next up, we have a fight between two guys who I would say are looking to keep their place in the UFC, but with Sam Alvey, I guess you never know. Michal Oleksiejczuk taking on Sam Alvey. This is a fight for Oleksiejczuk to get back on track. He lost his last matchup against Jacoby, and it might be a bit harsh for me to say that if he loses this fight, he's out of the UFC. They'd probably give him one more, but he's certainly in the fringe area, right? Because he's getting a fight with Sam Alvey. Alvey, I do think there's one aspect of this fight that does play into Alvey's hands, which is the fact that this fight will be mostly from the hands. Oleksiejczuk is an MMA fighter, but he's really coming out there to box. And to me, that does play into Alvey's hands. He really only wants to box as well. He likes to fight off his back foot. He's been trying to get more aggressive of late, but it's really hard to pick anybody but Oleksiejczuk in this fight. However, with the odds the way they are, I will be staying away from this fight. So my pick is Oleksiejczuk, but I will not be betting on this fight. Next up, we have the main card opener of Ariane Lipski taking on Priscila Cachoeira. So in this matchup, this is a hard one for me to pick. I gotta be honest with you guys. In terms of the record, Lipski's 14-7, Cachoeira's 11-4. Cachoeira's 5 years older. Lipski will have a 2-inch reach advantage, despite Cachoeira having a 1-inch height advantage. Cachoeira's win, I guess technically it was a win against Kim, really doesn't look so great. It didn't look great at the time. And Lipski, on the other hand, also I would say has had some up and down performances. So this fight from a betting perspective is one I'm going to stay away from. I haven't found an edge here. If you guys have an edge here, I'd love to hear it because I'd love to figure out an angle on this fight. But for me, this fight is a stay away. Next up on the main card, we have Augusto Sakai taking on Sergey Spivak. And to me, this is a kind of a crossroads fight. We have Augusto Sakai, who's 6'3". He's 31 years old. His last fight, he weighed in at 263.5, so near the limit of the heavyweight division. Spivak, on the other side, he's 27, so 4 years younger. Listed at the same height, but I think Spivak is taller. And Spivak has certainly gotten, we've noticed, right? He's gotten in better shape as his career has gone on. His last fight, he weighed in at 243, but he looks pretty lean at that 243. Spivak will have the wrestling advantage. And for that reason, I am picking Spivak in this fight. However, as a 2-1 favorite, I do think that's a little bit rich. I price it personally closer to -150. And for that reason, I'm debating whether I would add Spivak to a parlay or not bet this fight at all. I think there is a chance Sakai could find a knockout. I think that, coming off of 3 consecutive knockout losses, he's probably going to be a little bit gun shy, but at the same time, I could see Sakai understanding the position that he's in as far as his UFC career is and kind of going out there guns blazing because he knows he doesn't have anything to lose. If he gets knocked out again, that's probably it. They're probably going to cut him. At the same time, if he goes out and, loses a boring decision and gets out wrestled by Spivak, they're probably going to cut him as well. So I think Sakai knows he has to go for it. Whether he does is another question. So with that being said, I'm going to stay away from this fight, but I could see and understand why people would bet Spivak in this spot. Next up, we move on to the Ultimate Fighter finale. First up, we have finales, I should say. We have the women's flyweight finale of Juliana Miller taking on Brogan Walker. Now, Miller is 2-1. She is 26 years old, 5'7", I believe, and has 67 inches of reach. Walker, on the other hand, is 7'2". She is 32 years old, 5'4", also has 67 inches of reach. Now, I will say the record of Juliana Miller is a little bit misleading. She does have some amateur fights, but 2-1 is 2-1, and I do think the experience factor, along with from watching their fights on The Ultimate Fighter, Brogan Walker just seemed much more technical to me. And she showed an ability to stop the takedowns in 2 different fights on The Ultimate Fighter. And so for that reason, I'm going to side with Brogan Walker with her technical ability, with her kickboxing, and then also her fight IQ. I noticed from her 2 fights on the show, she knows where she wants to be, and she has a good understanding of where her opponents are trying to get her. And from those couple of fights on the show, along with, she does have a win over Miranda Maverick on the regional scene, and I think her experience is going to win out in this fight. So moving on to the next Ultimate Fighter finale, which is the heavyweight division. And we have Mohammed Usman taking on Zach Pauga. Of course, Usman is the brother of Kamaru Usman. And he's had an up and down career, I would say, as an MMA fighter. He does have 7 wins. Those 2 losses are to Dontel Mays and Brandon Sales of the PFL. Mays was a decision loss, but it was a clear decision loss. I scored it 30-27 for Mays. And in the other fight, he was finished in the first round. Now, on the show, Usman, to me, his first fight was a bit messy. And I thought that I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the name of the guy he fought. But if he would have Michal Sipe, who also fought on the Contender Series, actually against Dontel Mays, if he would have thrown more volume instead of more taunts, I think Sipe could have got the win. And Usman's second fight against Eduardo Perez, I actually scored it for Perez. I think Usman has a power advantage in this fight against Pauga, and we'll get into Pauga in a minute here. And I think Usman could wrestle him, but I'm worried about Usman's cardio, and I don't think he will wrestle him because in his 2 fights on The Ultimate Fighter, he didn't look to wrestle at all. Now, that could change, and I think that could be a cardio issue. I think maybe he's trying not to wrestle because of that. It's a much more taxing activity in MMA, right? To wrestle versus to strike or to grapple. And so that's concerning for me because I think if he wants to win this fight, that's going to be his path to victory. Pauga is 5-0. He does have some amateur fights on his record as well. So their experience is pretty similar. He's 34 years old, 6 foot, and I have an asterisk on his weight because as a pro fighter, he fought at light heavyweight, and I anticipate Pauga to move back down to light heavyweight after the Ultimate Fighter finale. Pauga's last fight before the Ultimate Fighter was actually against Marcus Perez, and his fight before that was also with Cage Warriors, but stateside. And in that fight, it was against Jean-Jacques, and he lost the first round because he got clipped, and he got dropped pretty bad in that fight. Pauga was able to recover in the first round, look better, and then win rounds 2 and 3. In his fight against Perez, Pauga lost the first round. Perez was able to get some control. The second round was very close, and I think it could have gone either way, and then Pauga was able to win round 3. In the house, Pauga had a close fight in his first one, and then his second one, he was able to pull away and get the TKO finish in the second round. And I think one of the big things with me, with Pauga that I like is his training partners. He's training with Curtis Blades and Alistair Overeem. in Colorado, and I think that's a big deal for Pauga in this fight in particular, especially because neither guy has a ton of experience, and so training with those high-level UFC fighters or a former UFC fighter in Overeem can only help Pauga, and for that reason, I have Pauga. He is the other piece to a small parlay I have that I mentioned earlier in this card with Josh Quinlan, but I will be looking to add Pauga in some other parlays as the week goes on. So Pauga is a pretty confident pick that I have for this weekend. Now moving on to the co-main event of UFC Fight Night, Santos versus Hill. We have Vicente Luque taking on Jeff Neal. Luque is coming off his loss to Belal Muhammad where he got out-wrestled, and that's not something he's going to have to worry about in this fight. I think Luque is the more versatile striker, but I think Neal is faster. And with the odds the way they are, I think this fight is closer to a 50-50 than Luque having, let's say, a 60-40 edge. And so for that reason, I'm going to take Jeff Neal. I don't have a strong feeling either way, so it's going to be a small bet for me. But in a 50-50 fight where I think both guys could win, the one bet that I would feel more strongly about than picking a side here would be the over in terms of rounds, and I would say over 1.5 versus 2.5. So I'm gonna have to see where that line is and hope to use it as a parlay piece. But I think both guys are pretty good on the feet. I don't see either guy finishing the other, so I might look to go fight goes to the decision. And I see this fight being a war, and I think it's going to be the people's, if you will, main event of this weekend. I think Neal takes it, but I think it's very close. I think he takes it 29-28. I think his speed with his hands is going to be the difference, but I could see Luque squeaking out a decision. Like I said, I think this is very close. If I'm going to bet it, it's going to be a small quarter of a unit bet on Neal or over 1.5 rounds as a parlay piece. All right, guys. Last up, we have the main event. We'll give a bit of a full breakdown. Here. So we have Thiago Santos taking on Jamahal Hill. So Santos is the veteran. Obviously, he's got 32 fights of MMA experience to just 11 of Jamahal Hill. He is 7 years older than Hill. Santos will have a 2-inch reach deficit and a 2-inch height deficit and a 3-inch reach deficit in this fight. And Santos, in my eyes, has not looked good. I do think the Ankalaev fight, he looked in some ways better than the Johnny Walker fight, which is a good sign. And he clipped Ankalaev pretty good in that second round, and that won him that round. But outside of that, there wasn't a lot going on from Santos. And what I like with Jamahal Hill is his ability to fight with length, to use a long jab, to throw his straight shots with length. And I think because of that, he will be able to stay at distance with Santos. And Santos doesn't have that same level of explosion that we saw from him earlier in his career. And so I think he's going to have a hard time getting inside with Hill. And so with that being said, I think Hill gets this done in round 2. I don't think it happens in round 1, but I think it happens early in round 2 with a KO. I think Hill is coming. I think he's really improving fight to fight, and he just seems to be getting better each time. Could this be the fight where his lack of experience and lack of versatility comes back to hurt him? Yes, because Santos is very experienced. He does have the ability to throw kicks along with his power punches, and so that could be an issue for Hill. But to me, with where Santos is in his career, I think this is Hill's fight to stake a claim. And I could see this leading to Santos versus Smith maybe in the future. And Hill, I'm not sure who he would take on if he were to get a win here. I think Ankalaev's maybe a step too far. But maybe, let's say, Rakic when he's healthy, let's say maybe beginning of next year. I could see something like that happening. So let me know what you guys think of my bets for UFC Fight Night, Santos versus Hill. How can I help you guys better moving forward with my predictions, my bets, and what do you want to see? And please, if you enjoy this content, please subscribe to the channel. Thanks.